This is the Free Spirits of L&D podcast, where we talk about life as a freelancer in the fascinating world of learning and development, and ask our guests all the questions you wanted to know but were maybe too afraid to ask. Yes, we even talk about how we get business and what we all charge. At the end of each episode, each guest gets to set a bonus question for the next one. So whether you're thinking about taking the leap, brand new to freelancing, or an experienced freelancer, you won't want to miss this. It's the first episode of the new series of the Free Spirits of L&D podcast, and our special guest today is Joe Cook. Now, many listeners will know Joe as the editor of the Training Journal magazine, but to me, Joe is very much my go-to expert for all things virtual classroom and webinars with her business, Lightbulb Moment. I have relied on her experience and all-round awesomeness for many, many years now. But welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for calling me special and not meaning it in a horrible way like most people do. So I appreciate that.
You really are. And genuinely, I have lost count of the number of times I've thought, I bet Joe knows this, or has written about this, or has produced something about this. And sure enough, you have. You are my guru for all things virtual.
That's very kind. I do have one or two resources on my website, to be fair. Even like during COVID 5 years ago, when I was starting to put stuff out there going, look, I've got all this stuff to help you. It's like, crikey, there's a lot of things that I've done. So I'm glad that they can be useful, and that's what they're there for.
Can we start with a question about your freelance journey? And I know you and I are both into superheroes, so maybe we should talk about your origin story.
Well, you see, I was born on the planet Krypton.
Of course.
So if anybody doesn't know, that's a Superman reference. I was actually self-employed or freelance or whatever you want to call it the first time round when I was 19. So I had studied journalism. Once that had finished, I basically didn't want to move to London and work on a newspaper. That wasn't me. And so I stayed at home and I did what I knew, which was to do some freelance writing. And I was teaching people computers. Now, this is back in the day. So we're talking, oh my goodness me, 27 years ago, 28 years ago. That's a scary, scary number. And I literally...
Did they even have computers then, Joe?
How dare you? And I put an advert in the Friday ad offering at-home computer training, and I charged £10 an hour and went to people's houses and taught them how to use Word or the internet or whatever it might be. And then I was kind of thinking, well, people won't remember everything I've done in this hour, so I should give them like some kind of handout and instructions. So then I started writing instructions on things that I'd shown them. And that's kind of part of how I got into L&D. I was kind of into that whole training area by then, and it grew from there. Then I got a job and various other things, and then in terms of like the freelance stuff, in 2013 or 2012 I'd been made redundant, picked up a year contract, then that finished, and I was kind of like going, what's next? And I'd gone through some virtual classroom training with Colin Steed, and they needed someone. They knew my contract was ending, so I picked that up. And it was also perfect for me because I have a chronic medical condition, and I had discovered in that year contract I just couldn't work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 in an office job. You know, every lunchtime I had a stinking headache and all sorts of stuff. So then it's just like, well, I've done freelance before, let's do it again. And however many years later we are now, I'm still going, so I'm obviously doing something right.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you know what? I don't know how we have never talked about this on the podcast so far, but I started looking up the derivation of the word freelancer the other day. Do you know where it comes from?
Or is it ancient Greek for selling tree branches or something? I don't know.
Do you know what? It's in the right wheelhouse. It's very literal. So it's from like medieval.
Yep.
Oh, what would you call them?
Jousters, knights on horses, that kind of thing.
What would you call somebody? A mercenary. That's what I was thinking of.
I didn't think we were going there, but I'll take it.
So like literally soldiers who would sell their lance. So rather than having it attached to like a house or a lord or what have you, they'd basically just sell their services as a mercenary to the highest bidder.
I mean, that's pretty much what we do now, so it makes sense.
our tools have just become a little bit more sophisticated.
I mean, a tiny bit.
But I thought it was kind of an interesting one because I've always had a bit of an issue with that word, freelance. It feels like it cheapens the value and the impact that people who work in a freelance space, particularly L&D, can offer. Because I don't know, it always has this kind of connotation of, oh yeah, we'll do a bit of anything. As long as the price is right, we'll help you out. And I think it's moved on from that.
And I think when people say things like, so I tend to say, I run my own business, which, not because I'm not freelance, but I think freelance from like a legal and a tax point of view is different. Whereas like technically I'm a director of a limited company, and like legally and tax and all that stuff, it's different from freelance because I'm not self-employed and that whole thing. Technically I'm employed by my company.
Yes.
So that's why I tend to say I run my own company rather than freelance. But to an extent, they're interchangeable because it's about I'm not employed by a company. But I think you're right. Freelance has if not cheapened, it's certainly got a more relaxed approach or a more kind of will move around approach, whereas that concept of I run my own business or variations of that is a bit more this is what I do. I sell product X, I do service Y. And I think there's a difference in the solidity of that, maybe.
Yeah.
As opposed to a jobbing freelancer, that might be the way you're thinking. But that, I mean, as you say, it's not bad, and everybody's perception will be different. Some people's perception of freelance will be amazing and variety and all sorts of different things. So it will depend on the person and their background and stuff like that, definitely.
Can we come back to superheroes?
No, not at all. I hate talking about superheroes.
I do know for a fact you like talking about Superman. Who's your favourite, right?
Yes. So Richard Donner, who directed Superman the movie, 1978, Christopher Reeve, he had this kind of guiding light, which was the word verisimilitude, VERIS, verisimilitude, which means the appearance of being true or real. It's like all the advertising posters back then was you'll believe a man can fly, and they invented all sorts of amazing techniques. 1978 when it was released, absolutely stunning. Even to this day, a lot of the Superman 1 flying scenes really hold up. Superman 3 and 4 less so. We won't talk about those. But the way that Richard Donner talks about verisimilitude is it's about respecting the source material. And one of the things that the new Superman film does is, and again, I'm not a comic book fan, but I've seen this all over Facebook or wherever, is that you can put whichever comic book it is that the new director's drawing from side by side with some of the scenes from the film, and it's like an exact replica of those, which is really positive. Now, to take this into a kind of, okay, thanks, I'm not really into a podcast listening about superheroes. What does this actually mean for me? The way that I look at this is two different ways for L&D. One is this idea of the appearance being true or real is around what we're delivering, about what we're presenting, about what we're facilitating, if we're thinking of live and in the moment, about what is real about the content, about the concept, about the behaviour change. And then the other thing that Richard Donner had of respecting this source material, I'm going to interpret as being evidence-based. So this whole thing about not using learning styles because there's no empirical evidence to support that teaching to those actually impacts things in a positive way. So that's how I kind of see those things. And it's also how I link everything in my life back to Superman.
I mean, it feels like we have to go down this as a little segue, but thinking about your freelance life, do you have any areas of running your own business that are a bit of a kryptonite for you?
Oh, nice question. And for those of you that don't know, which is probably no one, kryptonite is the stuff that is from Superman's home planet, came to Earth, and is a meteor, and it basically renders him, what's the word, Mark? Powerless.
Human.
Renders him powerless. So what renders me powerless in my business? Tax, accounting, numbers, marketing, sales, pretty much all of it really. But it is about, when you run your own business, any version of freelance working on your own, you have to be good to a certain extent at a lot of those different things. It doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean an expert. It doesn't mean amazing. You can learn as you go, which I certainly have. You can outsource. You can get good advice. You can be in good networks. And that's like L&D Free Spirits is absolutely amazing for that, because you can put a question on the Slack group and so like, so this tax thing, or like this new national insurance thing if you're in the UK, well, what does that mean? And we have a good debate about that. And then there's always someone who's got a bit more experience than you that can help you with just like, have a look at my website that I'm updating or whatever it is and give you some advice. So I think it's about those things that you might not be great at, either leaning in and just learning it, which you have to a certain extent, and also having the right people around you. So I've just changed accountants recently. Like I'm in the middle of changing, because my previous accountant, whilst I was with her for a number of years and she did some really good stuff, I just found she wasn't available. There was stuff where I was asking things and she'd answered and I'd do something and then something else came up and like, well, hang on, I asked you this and you said yes, and now we're in this place where it's not quite working. So I just needed someone I could trust more and work with more. So finding those right people around you then compensates for that kryptonite.
Thank you for that, Jo. Wow, what an amazing answer. We'll come to the superpowers as well in a second. But I think people often lose sight of that when they're either starting off in their freelance journey or sometimes when they're deep into it. I've certainly experienced this with the nature of my freelance business is that I deal with a lot of different brands who are all over the world. Mm-hmm. And my initial accountant just didn't understand it. I needed to remind myself that I get to build the team who support me with all the things that are my kryptonite, which are to do with numbers and tax and figuring that stuff out. Weirdly, I don't know if you kind of touched on this there. I found that the more I got into figuring some of that stuff out, the more I kind of enjoyed it a bit in a really weird, perverse way. I thought, actually, I'm just going to treat myself to a nice coffee and go and do all of my, receipts and get all of my accounts reconciled and get it in order. It's like tidying up before a cleaner comes.
Yeah,
it feels a bit like that. Or brushing your teeth before you go to the dentist. Just kind of think, oh yeah, this is all right actually.
It's about, I think, leaning into who you are, and this is about knowing who you are and being in alignment with your true inner self, which is a learning experience. It's something you get with time, with self-development of some different kinds, with doing work and stretched goals and stretched projects and all of those things. And for me, I used to blame everything on being a Gemini. So my birthday's in June. And it's just like, oh, well, it's the twins, it's the two-face, it's the, I mean, at one point I seriously went, am I bipolar? And I went and researched it because I'd swing between things. And partly it's just like, actually, maybe there's some neurodivergence in there that I've really realised this last couple of years. And maybe also with this chronic medical condition I've got, it makes me tired, gives me pain. So, there are some days I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. And there are other days where I'm on the sofa going, no, and I can't even concentrate on the TV. So within that, it's lean into those things. So there are some times I find I can be organised and have a list and everything for the next 3 weeks is planned and done and dusted and absolutely great. And then if I look to my right of the bit that's off webcam in my office, it's a little unorganised and untidy. But at some point, I'll be in the right mood, and that could be hormonal if you're on the female end of the spectrum, shall we say. That I'll just be like, nope, I'm going to clear it up, I'm going to tidy up, I'm going to do this. And I've learned that as long as it's not negatively impacting other people or myself, to just lean into that and go with it. And sometimes that is, all my receipts are done, the list is gone, the numbers have come down, and that feeds whatever part of me that enjoys that. And if that's not me, then it's like, well, earn enough money to pay someone else to do it. Or, entice your partner who loves writing a list. I don't know, whatever it is, find your way to work that. It takes work, it takes time, but it means that you go with the grain. Things run smoother than if you're fighting that all the time. And that's certainly something I've learned over the last few years.
If it's any reassurance, as a fellow June baby, I kind of fluctuate between extremes of chaos or seeming chaos and complete minimalism and kind of calm Zen stuff.
Oh, I'm not alone.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, I'm researching an article at the moment about the psychology of your kind of workspace. I will find some of the research links and I'll pop them in the show notes in case anyone's interested, because, I don't want to be preaching learning styles or anything like that on the podcast for people who work in learning and development. But one of the things that really struck me was this idea that we have this sort of story that we tell ourselves that having a really tidy desk space leads to a really tidy mind and a really nice, clean way of thinking and a minimal way of thinking and an organized way of thinking. Whereas in fact, there are kind of all sorts of situations where it has been proven that having a very messy, chaotic workspace can put your mind into a particular mode. So for example, there is evidence to show that having a messy workspace is likely to lead to more creative ideas. It's almost as though like breaking that story in your mind gives your mind permission to break out beyond the box or the boundaries or whatever you've set out for yourself. So it might not be all so bad. What's going on off camera?
And also there's areas where we're focusing much more on neurodivergence and stuff now, where we can lean into, you know, understanding that for some people, having everything out and being able to see everything is their superpower. You know, for other people, it might be, oh my God, it's a mess and you've got everything out. Why don't you put it in cupboards or in drawers or whatever that might be? So I've got a lot of monitor real estate because I like to see everything. And if I think back, and this is a bit about getting to know yourself, as a kid, when I did my homework, we had a really big dining room table because we always had millions of people around for dinner. And so I would have all of my books out and all of my notes out and literally spread out with everything within arm reach. And I'm very tall, so that's a long arm reach. And I'd have it all open. It's like, oh, okay. You know, and if that's you, as I say, go with it. And if it's not you and you do work well with the minimalist and get the clutter out of the way, then go with that too. But also, like you say, look at the research. And also you can experiment with the other way of working as well. And that's the nice thing, is you don't have to be one thing. And that's what I love about life these days, working life these days, and especially running your own business, is you get to choose what your life is within a certain amount of context and reason and reality.
I love that. How about with your superpowers then? If you had to pick, I know Superman's got all sorts, but do you have any kind of freelance superpowers that you're really proud of?
Yeah, I think it's variety. It's working on variety. So a few years ago in Lightbulb Moment, we were super laser focused on developing the virtual classroom training modules that we offer. And I say we at the time because my brother was working with me. And it was absolutely the right thing to do. We'd rewritten everything after COVID because, you know, the market changed. We'd put a lot of time, effort and money into it. So it was absolutely right to do that for the business. But there came a point where the market changed again, where there wasn't the amount of work available because, quite frankly, everybody thought they knew how to deliver a good virtual classroom. Also, I didn't realise this at the time, it wasn't till afterwards that I realised this laser focus wasn't drawing on all of my strengths. And therefore it was getting me a bit down, I was feeling a bit stuck. And once that changed, there was a number of changes at that time, but, you know, I took on the TJ editorship part-time. I picked up some other contracts part-time. Sadly, my brother had to leave the business, but he's off doing something else now. And all of those things changed. And all of a sudden I went, oh, I've got my autonomy back and I've got my variety back because, you know, one morning I'm doing TJ stuff and editing articles. Then I'm interviewing someone. Then I'm on a podcast with someone like you and having really great conversations. And then I'm doing a contract where I'm researching something or other. And then another contract where I'm doing blah, 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 blah. And that variety is something that I manage mostly pretty well. Sometimes when deadlines all come together, it can be a bit of a challenge. But also what I love is that what I do in one place helps me in another. So going back to our superhero thing, what Clark Kent hears and sees as Superman with his super hearing, he then goes off and solves the problem and reports on it for the Daily Planet and gets a great scoop. So it's about using those things. You know, I have a conversation with somebody that I've spoken to for Training Journal and then go, oh, actually, you'd be a great speaker for World of Learning or whatever it might be. So those things is what I love, but that suits me. I know other people who are like, oh, I couldn't do that. I like to do one thing and focus on that. And so that goes back to that, lean into what's right for you.
Thanks, Jo. I want to move on to a question that our previous guest, way back at the end of our first series of the podcast, posed, and it was Tom McDowell, who I'm sure you'll know. And he posed a really interesting question for our next guest, not knowing that it would be you. And that was, if you could experiment with any one thing that you currently do with a big change, what would it be? And what would that experiment look like?
Oh, lovely, Tom, and lovely question. Really good question. So I guess it could be something around the training side of things, whether that's working with clients, whether that's creation of a learning intervention, whether that's facilitation of that, or any of the, the post-session resources and all of that kind of support that goes on. But where my mind went to first is using AI agents to help me with the bits of my work that's overwhelming. And I put out on LinkedIn recently, as of the time we're recording, that I'd come back from holiday and the School of Facilitation Festival, which was amazing. And I had in my training journal inbox, I had 814 emails or something. And I was a bit surprised. I thought it was going to hit 1,000. So I was very disappointed with that. And that's just incomprehensible. Going back to this bipolar Gemini swing, I love the GTD getting things done approach, and I like to get my inbox down to 0, and that just doesn't happen these days. And so I've been looking for a little while about how can AI help me, bearing in mind I've been using Outlook for a million years, so I've got all sorts of rules set up and all sorts of stuff, but that doesn't help me deal with 814 emails as much as I need it to. And everything I found doesn't plug into Outlook, or it's like, we can help you write emails. It's like, no, I can write emails. I'm good with that. I need something to help me go through 814 emails and sort things out. And so the thing I'd like to find is the agentic AI that actually connects to my Outlook account, and probably multiple accounts for different contracts I work on, and helps me with that. And so far I haven't found it, although somebody did suggest something to me the other day, and I've asked them for more details. And once I find something, believe me, I'm going to share about it, because it would be life-changing. So that's what I want to experiment with. And that is, in my world, I think that's quite big. Not everybody has that volume of emails, but I think if you broaden that out, it's about finding the right tech to help us with the pinch points. As well as the people, as we discussed earlier on.
Wow, yeah. As you know, I'm a massive nerd when it comes to all things tech, and particularly AI more often than not. And I'm really excited by what the advent of agentic AI means for us. I think most people now have got to grips with large language models that are on offer, and like ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity and all the things that they can do, but they still require the act of getting in there and prompting it. Whereas if you can... I think they're calling them large action models now, where they are designed to take action on your behalf. And that takes us into a really interesting place in terms of productivity. And also a really weird place where, like, theoretically, you could just have robots talking to each other all day and humans just don't get involved, which makes you wonder, what is email even for then in that scenario, in that situation? Because as you were talking about that my kind of coaching brain's thinking, the problem's email. It isn't the fact that you've got 800 of it. The problem is the way we treat email and the way most people use it, and the formality of email that we've carried over from letter writing that hasn't really gone away yet. It's
a little bit. It's a little bit. I put smileys in my emails now when I know people, and if I go back 25 years when I was teaching letter writing for Pitman or whatever the course was at the time, if anybody had said that to me, I would have failed them instantly. So it is interesting how those things have changed. But also, I think you're right. The problem is email and how we use it and our expectations. But this always comes down to human behaviour. So, for instance, at TJ, I get a lot of press releases come through. Absolutely great, because then I can write a news page every Wednesday and publish that on TJ, which is hopefully useful to people in L&D. But I then get people sending the email again to me going, just want to pick up on this, see if this was right for TJ. And it's like, I understand your job is to get coverage for whatever this thing is, but I have a standard auto response that goes out to people saying, I work 1.5 days a week. I promise I will read your email. The response will be slower than I want it to be. And then there's a whole load of stuff around, if it's a news item, if it's a press release, please send me a link to the press release because that's the only way I can use it, blah, 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 detail. If it's this, then that, blah, 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 and so on. So actually, when I go through my emails, my process is click on an email, then click the from column, because then I go back to the 3 previous emails that are going, just getting this to the top of your inbox again, and delete it. So that 814 emails, within an hour, I deleted 300 of them that were just that. And it's that kind of thing where it's just like, I don't want to be ungrateful because people are sending me stuff and I want stuff and that's great. But people's behaviour is partly what's driving that challenge. So it's things like that. I'm only calling out one tiny thing, but to your point, email plus human behaviour is part of the issue, I think.
Would you like to pose a question for our next guest to answer?
Oh, I should definitely have something superhero related, shouldn't I? Okay, so for the next guest, thinking about Superman and Clark Kent and the dichotomy of those personalities and how they had to act and what that meant for their everyday life. What dichotomy do you have in your life? Where do you wear 2 hats and maybe they're contrasting? Where do you have 2 things going on? Maybe you're an expert in L&D, but you're not an expert in running your business, a bit like we've talked about. How does that work? How do you manage your Clark Kent and your Superman in order to be a whole person?
Awesome question. Thank you, Jo. Can I throw it back at you, particularly in the context of...
Person.
I'm sorry, I know. But part of the things, you're in a really, I guess, to me, quite an unusual position in having a space where you run your own business and also an employed role. So there's a duality to that.
Training journal is a contract role, so I'm not an employee. Okay. So it doesn't matter what it looks like, but technically behind the scenes, it's a contract. But to all intents and purposes, it looks like an employed role, absolutely. So I still understand your question. I think it's still a valid question.
Yeah. And how do you manage that? How do you manage those hats?
Sometimes badly, because sometimes deadlines converge, you have competing priorities, and what is going to be number one priority. And that can be a real challenge, but it's my challenge to manage that for my clients. And sometimes that's not as good as I want it to be, but that is my job to make that better. Most of the time, 98% of the time, it works absolutely fine because it goes back to me working in that variety really nicely. Because what I don't do is go, okay, Mondays is for TJ, Tuesdays is for contract 2, Wednesdays is for contract 3. Partly because that doesn't work for me. It's this weird Gemini, bipolar, who's not bipolar, whatever it is going on thing. My mum calls it difficult. I call it organic and creative. It doesn't work for having a chronic medical condition where, you think, right, tomorrow I'm going to do all this stuff. And then you wake up having had very little sleep and a headache. And you're like, okay, no, I'm going to sit down and wait for my painkillers to kick in. It also doesn't work when things change for your contracts or your deadlines. And also, I think it doesn't work in the day and age we're in. Like you say, people want an instant response to email or whatever. So I can be editing an article for TJ, but I see an email come in for the contract that I've got for Finding World of Learning conference speakers. And actually, these are competing deadlines, but I've got all day to work on World of Learning, but I need to publish this thing by midday or whatever for Training Journal. So that's a case of, I can spend a minute to go and answer that email or forward it to the person that needs it or something, and then head back to TJ. So I think that being able to pop in and out of those things, I can do okay. Yes, there's a bit of task switching and that change, and sometimes you get back to it and go, what was I going to do next? And you have that moment and it takes time. And the research does say, when you're task switching, it costs you time. and it costs you stress and stuff like that. But I think there's a point at which you can do it, a bit like driving a car, changing gear, whatever it is, you're doing some of that automatically. And then there's the point at which you are interrupting yourself and sabotaging your own work, which sometimes I do on purpose. It's like, I don't want to do this. Let me check my email. And I've got like 78 different email accounts. There must be something that can grab my attention that not drag me away from the thing I don't want to do. But also it means that when I am waiting for something, I've got something else to work on. When something's fried my brain, I go and do something different. And that shifting gear means I can come back to it fresh later on, or a different insight. So it works for me. It doesn't work for everybody else. And as I always say, you have to find what's right for you. And if what's right for you is focusing in one area and one client, and you like being employed and you like the stability of that, then fantastic, lean into that. My other half is like that. He's just like, I want to go to work, do my stuff, come home, not have to think about it. Fantastic. But that's not me. That's not how I work. So doing what's right for you is always really important. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. It does answer your question. And I love the way that you kind of visually described it. And it makes me wonder, actually, in many ways, it is like having an employed role, because I can imagine there are lots of people who are in professional skilled roles who work in an office environment who will spend all day kind of opening doors and walking into different rooms and having conversations with people. And they might be different on different projects or kind of different outputs. It's the same thing, yeah, as what you described.
Exactly. And I think there's a slight difference in that I have more autonomy. So when I was doing that for some of my corporate roles, that wasn't always welcomed. It's like, Joe, what are you doing over in finance when you should be in your L&D training office? It's like, well, they need me. And it's quite frankly more interesting than what I'm supposed to be doing. So that didn't always work. But if your role does have that in it and you like it and are good at it, then absolutely, it's not dependent on being self-employed or anything. And many corporate jobs, you wear many hats and do a lot of things, and you get to the end of the day going, I've just been in 85 meetings, then now I've got my 814 emails. How do I handle all of this? And this is where we come back to agentic AI and having the right team around you and delegating to real people or AI, however that works for you, and all the other good stuff.
Well, we'll definitely put out an APB for anyone who's listening who is really into kind of the bleeding edge of AI. If you know of an agentic AI or a kind of automation system that might help Joe with their problem, let us know, get in touch, and we can pass on the details.
All of my problems.
Sounds like it. Definitely sounds like it. I'm going to move on to the question that we ask all of our guests, Joe, which is, thinking particularly about your freelance hat, what do you charge?
It depends.
I'll ring the depends bell. Bing, 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 bing. Tell me more.
Everyone says that. Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. It's one we all grapple with. It changes. So when things are in high demand, I charge more. When the financial climate changed a few years ago, guess what? I charge less. And suddenly it's like, at one point I was charging £1,000 or more a day, which was amazing. I don't charge £1,000 a day at the moment for some things. It also depends a little bit on who you're working for. So obviously any charity work is something a little bit different, and I choose to support that, and I can support that, which is really nice. It also depends on relationship and what you're getting out of a contract. So not every contract or piece of work is about just I pay my bills. There's some work that I do where I think, well, actually, I'm going to get in front of this audience, or I'm going to be building relationships with people who I don't have a network with already. So actually, that's valuable to me in a way that's not just pounds, shilling and pence. So therefore, I'll be happy to accept monetarily what might not be my ideal number. Also, there might be things that you want to support, or organisations that are just starting out, or whatever it might be. And you think that's worth it. But other times, if you're like, I've got to protect my time, I've only got, like any person on the planet, we've only got so much time. We should do work that we believe in, that we're passionate about, if we have those choices, if we're in a good position to be able to do that. And we should be fairly compensated for that, because we've all got mortgages to pay. And that awful thing of exposure doesn't pay the mortgage or the rent, which is true. However, I've built my career on, quite frankly, exposure. Because, as you know, anybody who'll put a camera or a microphone in my face, I'm happy to talk to. I've written a lot, I've shared a lot of content, and that has worked. All of that networking that I've done has worked, and that's where I get the most of my business from. It's not from an advert on LinkedIn. It's not that kind of stuff. So that's worked for me. Maybe it doesn't work for every business, and it's not just one thing, it's always a variety of things. So what do I charge? To come back to some actual numbers that might help people. Again, it depends. In an ideal world, I'm still aiming for that £1,000 a day, depending on what the work is. So that's more of the specialist work. It's the stuff I've got nearly 30 years experience in. It's the stuff that not every trainer can do, not every facilitator can do, not every L&D expert can do, because I've got different experience and different background to other people, and likewise other people have got different specialisms than I do, so they rightly charge what they do. But also, I was discussing this with someone the other day and basically saying you should be charging more than £400 a day for the work that you're doing, because they were in a very unique specialism. But I had to caveat with that with, well, actually, I did an afternoon's work recently for £400 and I really should have charged £1,000, but I believed in what I was doing. Actually, I was going anyway, so I thought I might as well have a position of authority. And I liked the people, I wanted to support them, blah, blah, blah. So, you have those competing things. And I think it's a lot about choosing the right number for the right project and the outcome, and not just thinking bottom line all the time. It's what other outcomes are going to happen from that project. Am I going to learn something? Is that worth, maybe not a discount, but is that worth taking on that project at that price rather than a different price because I'm going to learn a new system or a platform or, whatever your thing is.
Thank you, Jo. Can I ask you a little sort of mini sub-question related to that? Because I think, again, you're in quite a unique position here of having been through a lot of these kind of cycles of freelancing. And I'm thinking about the person that you were talking to around, who's charging £400 a day, and you were thinking, you should charge more. How do you navigate getting your price higher when you've already established what your rate is?
That is something I haven't necessarily done successfully myself. It is interesting. I had a contract for a number of years with an organisation and went in low at the beginning and never, ever got it up to even anything resembling market rate. And as a couple of years, I put it up a bit, but not much. And they pushed back, rightly so. It's like, why are you putting this up 40% or whatever, 60% in one day, one time? And I remember at one point putting in a number, and it wasn't double what I charged the year before, but it was a lot more. It was maybe 60% more or something. And they rightly pushed back. And I kind of explained, well, I'm doing X, Y, Z a lot and a lot of specialism. And I went out to a colleague who basically offers the same thing. It's like, let me sense check this with you. What would you charge? And in round numbers, I was trying to charge £8,000. And in round numbers, they went, about 3.5. And I was like, maybe my ego has got the better of me. And so I went back to them and went, I'm just double checking because it's all of this. And it was basically being available all day, every day for like 2 weeks. Like literally, we've got a problem, go. And they went, or in that case, like a minimum of 10. And I was like, right, and I'm trying to charge 8. Okay, I feel better about that. It still got to a point where they decided to move on, and you have to accept that. If you're going to change your prices, you have to accept that might mean they move on. And it was a bit of a blow at the time because, you like to think you're friends with people and you take it personally.
Yeah.
And I lost the money as well. It's just like, would I have rather have had 3, 4, 5 grand rather than, I never would have got 10, but I certainly wouldn't have got 8. So would I have preferred that number? But the flip side is you have to know your value in order to have confidence, in order to get the work you deserve, in order to get the money you deserve. And so I can't say I've done that terribly successfully, but I think the key is when you've got a new client or contract, trying to get somewhere approaching the right number in the first place. And there's all sorts of places you can go for that support and to get understanding and help about that, especially when you're running your own business, because it is really hard. And a lot of it is really tied up with our own personal values and cents. And when we kind of go, but it's just me, why would somebody pay me £1,000? When it's actually, no, you've been doing this for 30 years and everybody tells you you're awesome, even when they're being private, and they could tell you you're rubbish. So maybe you deserve £1,000 a day or £100 a day or whatever your thing is. So I think communities like L&D Free Spirits are really great places to go to learn that, and learn that actually maybe I'm undercharging or undervaluing, and also help us develop the resilience, the self-esteem, the tools that we need in order to have those robust conversations. So I think it's easier to start with a new client than it is to get another client back.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty with that one, Jo. It's I think it's the trickiest bit to navigate for all the reasons that you've said.
And it's about finding the right clients. I attended some stuff from Murray Powell recently, and his thing is a lot of his things is about finding the ideal client. And so if you're talking to the right people, I always like to say, I just like direct and honesty. I'm not good at playing games. I'm not good at mind games and all of that other stuff. So it's just like, what's your budget? X. Okay, I can do it for X, or I can't, but let's find what we can do for X. Or, happy days, that's what I want to charge, or whatever it might be, because those conversations are so much easier. And if you find that right client, it makes everything easier as well. That's another easy thing to do. Great, right, that's knocked off the list. Find ideal clients. Thanks, Jo. Go and do that.
It's true though, because there's a certain set of clients, there is a ceiling, and you will never get beyond that ceiling with them. As soon as you know who they are, you can sort your value to them out accordingly.
And equally, I remember a long time ago pitching for a piece of work, and I didn't get the work because I was too cheap. So, when I was up against, I don't know who, some other big company, training company, and I'd quoted $3,500 and this other company quoted $15,000 or something, essentially for the same piece of work. I remember at the time going, how are they charging $10,000? Because the work was very well defined. I was just like, I don't see how they can, well, obviously because they can charge more because they're big and they do stuff and they offer whatever. But it's just like, if the work is exactly what it says it is in this very detailed document, I can absolutely deliver that for $3,500. But that wasn't the perception. And so that taught me a really interesting lesson. And like you say, you can come down, although that contract I just said where I didn't get it because I was trying to get my price up, I remember one year putting in a price going, okay, well, if I put in, say, the $10,000, they'll negotiate down to 8 or 7 and we'll both be happy or whatever. And they didn't negotiate. They just went, okay, no. So like, oh, okay. So, it's so difficult to get it right, and you'll get it wrong, but sometimes you'll get it right. But it's this is where, you've got to learn stuff. You've got to find your group. You've got to find your tribe that can help you with that and chip away at building that confidence and those tools that you need.
Yeah. Just to build on a point you made earlier on about kind of AI and also experiments, kind of fusing those together. I recently have started messing around with that in terms of pricing strategy as a bit of an experiment. So because I'm in that space with a lot of clients, I want to try and creep things a little bit further up. With new projects and proposals that come in, I've started feeding that into my AI of choice and asking it to scope it out and also shrink it down, so I can always go back with 3 options. So there will always be the option. Absolutely. It is. And more often than not, it's worked. So I've been able to, without having to get into the whole awful negotiation around, we want to remove this, and this, I can show them. So here is option A. It's the rock bottom thing. You'll get the minimal from me, but it will deliver the outcomes that you want. There's option B, which is a little bit more than that, and you'll get a bit more from me. And there's like the gold standard, all singing or dancing, fireworks, troops of people with marching bands, option 3, and it costs X amount more. But hey, you'll get something that's that much more. And a couple of cases, people have gone for the gold version, but more often than not, people go for the middle one because the relativity of it all kicks in, and people can start to recognise their value for what it is against all of the other options that they could pick from.
And On a similar line but a different way of working, I've just sent out my brochure of virtual classroom training to somebody this morning. And I haven't looked at that brochure in maybe a year, something like that. And all the training I offer is still the same, but I went and looked at it because it still had some old details and phone numbers on, so I thought I should change that. And I realised, so I've got, one of the things I do is 3 virtual classroom training modules. And I've got all sorts of other bits and pieces, but that's like the flagship thing. If you want your team on virtual classroom training, there are those 3 modules you can mix and match and pick and choose from. And I had like an enhanced version, which was much more the L&D offering that we'd all like to give, with pre-this and project that and facilitation and consultation and coaching and all the other stuff. And I've sold precisely one of those in the last 5 years. So it's like, it's muddying the waters. It makes the brochure look complicated. And yeah, I'd love to still sell that, but just cut all that complication. And if somebody says, actually, can you do, it's like, actually, yeah, I've got some brochures pages I can send you. So it is about making that sales journey easier for people to buy from you. Yeah. So yeah, we're getting into a whole other topic now.
Well, the psychology of a sale. It is murky waters, you're right there, but I do agree. I think, as a buyer, I don't want to think about it. I know I want to work with the person. Make it as easy as possible for me to say yes.
And as you say, we still buy from people. Even when it's business to business, even if you're pitching to large companies, you still have a relationship with the L&D manager, the purchaser, whoever it is, you have a relationship with that person. And it's interesting on this line with Training Journal, when I started, the salesperson was sending out a literally 1-page, non-branded piece of paper with "this is what we sell." And it was like emailed to our newsletter subscription and blah, blah, blah. And even I didn't understand what some of the things were that we were selling. And I didn't understand some of the phrases. And our clients were not understanding stuff. And they're like, so what is a soulless email? And it's like, apparently it's a marketing term. I had to go and look it up. I did not know. And it's basically an email that goes out to your subscriber list. And so I put it in a rebranded document. I explained it. I even put links to, here's a screen grab of a newsletter with a text insert so that you know what it looks like. You know what you're buying. And it was much easier and much simpler after that. And, but we can do a lot of this with our L&D hats on. So our strengths in L&D are usually around knowing audience, instructional design, simplifying, writing guides, all of that kind of traditional trainer stuff. And I know L&D is bigger than that. But they're some of the keen things that we're good at. So we can use those for our website, for our LinkedIn posts, for our brochure and price list, or whatever way works for you. Use those skills you have, but it's just looking at things from a different angle or for a different audience.
Thank you, Jo. We're just getting ready to wrap up now. We've covered so much in the conversation today. It feels like we need a part 2 at some point. So hopefully you'll be able to come back and we can take a deeper dive into some of these other areas and talk about some other superheroes, perhaps.
I did tell you this wouldn't be a short...
we did. You were right. You were completely right.
I'm always right. I wished.
If people want to find out more about what you do, how you can help them, where's the best place to find you?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn, Jo Cook, that's a good place to start. My website is lightbulbmoment.info. And you can also find all sorts of goodness on trainingjournal.com. And I welcome anybody contributing to Training Journal if you want to. There's a page there that tells you how. Just drop me a message and say, I'd like to write this, and I'll probably say yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jo.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for the great work you do on the podcast. And thank you to everyone for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, let us know by leaving a review on your favourite podcast app. It really makes a difference. And if you want to learn more about how L&D Free Spirits can lift up your freelancing business, you can find out more information at ldfreespirits.com.